You're listening to IRN, the Inception Radio Network, Chicago, Illinois.
The Extraordinary Phenomenon Investigations Council presents Epic Voyages. Come join us as we enter and experience the great mysteries of the world with tonight's host,
Laurel B. Tague. Welcome back, everybody, to Epic Voyages Radio here at InceptionRadioNetwork.com. Please check us out at the website and join our chat room where you can ask live questions, and I and the other hosts usually provide resources and links to our guests' websites and their books, and even some pictures, images, photos of things we're talking about. So make sure you go to InceptionRadioNetwork.com and check out the chat room. Also, you can listen live tonight, several different formats. They also have tips on how to listen through other devices like smartphones. And we are rebroadcast on Dark Matter Radio Network on Friday evenings at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. We have hundreds of, at least dozens, probably over 200, archived radio broadcasts here at Epic Voyages Radio, so check those out as well. Look at our website, www.epicvoyagers, E.P.I.C. VOYAGERS.com. We're trying to upgrade it, and we've got links there to our Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and YouTube channels, which are pretty interesting for you to look at. And you can also find us on the Inception Radio Network's Roku Box channel. So tonight we have quite a show in store for you. Our president and founder of Epic Voyagers, Ken Cherry, has just published his first book. And this is a really interesting topic because it's based on the factual investigation into the Stephenville, Texas UFO sightings that occurred in January. Actually, I think they started in December, but in January of 2008, December 2007, and they actually continued on throughout 2008. It's a fascinating story. Ken was the Texas State MUFON director at the time. He is the main contact that received most of the calls from people citing, wanting to make a report. He was in charge of the investigation. And the entire book, and it's a substantial book, it's almost 400 pages, is literally based on the absolute facts. It's a novel. It's based on the facts of what happened. And he ties in a lot of his firsthand experience with other investigations in which he was involved, and his knowledge about what's really going on at the national level in terms of UFO research and investigation. So before I welcome Ken to the show, and we talk about his new book, Marc Slade Investigates, the Stephenville UFO. I want to tell you just a little bit more about him. He's a Texas native. He grew up in a South Dallas County suburb, got a BA in business from University of Texas at Arlington, magna cum laude. He was a stockbroker in Dallas and then moved to Wall Street, and then he became the regional VP for Lehman Brothers in Chicago. After that, when he retired in the mid-1980s, he came back to Texas, north of Fort Worth, to start his own securities business. He joined MUFON in 1991. I mentioned he was named the Texas State Director. And one more thing I forgot to mention about his book. There is a page on the Epic Voyagers website where you can go to the bookstore and actually order a copy of the book. It's at a very good price. Ken's only asking $17. It's autographed by Ken. It includes tax, shipping, handling, everything. And you'll get it probably within 24 to 48 hours. It's a standard delivery and shipping. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Ken, are you still with me there?
I'm still here. Thank you very much for that introduction. One correction. Summa cum laude, please.
oh, I am so sorry, because what I had, the written material I had said magma. Yeah, it's magma, not even magna. Ken, we've got you blowing out the top of a volcano here. So summa cum laude, noted. Okay. I didn't also mention this, but it kind of goes along with being summa cum laude. Ken has been a Mensa member for how many years, Ken?
43 now.
That's on up there, getting on up there.
Yeah, I'm holding out for my 50-year pin. So,
you're up in Keller, north of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. How's the weather treating you with all these tornadoes that we've been hearing about?
It's just incredible. I'm a Texas native, and I don't recall a wetter spring than this and all of my years here. It's just there's rain in the forecast every day for the next week, and it's just been raining constantly for the last couple of weeks. So the reservoirs are refilling. We were experiencing a drought like a lot of other parts of the country, but they're even releasing water from some of the dams around here locally. They're become overfull. So I can't complain. It's keeping the heat down, and the farmers love it, and maybe the drought conditions will be solved. So, it's all good. It's all good.
Yeah, I tell you, being a native Texan myself, I, of course, watched the weather there. I remember, this is going to sound funny, but with some fondness, riding out the hailstorms and the high winds and everything during the April, May, June storm season. But you guys have been baking. You actually have, Texas only has one native actual natural lake, and that's Caddo Mills, I think, along the border with Louisiana. Every other lake in Texas, and there are hundreds of them, are reservoirs. So that's how dry Texas is. And many of those reservoirs were down to bedrock in the last few years. So you guys need some rain.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about you a little bit before we talk about the book. And remember, I didn't say the title right up at the front. It's Marc Slade Investigates, the Stephenville UFOs. So we know you were the Texas State Director at the same time that this outbreak, let me call it an outbreak, started in January of 2008. But now you've written a novel. It's not like a documented factual research book. And it's 7 years later. So why now? And why a novel?
Well, I did begin it as a tell-all because the investigation was really an experience of a lifetime. And I wanted the world to know what I had discovered in the course of my investigation. The actual investigation, as far as MUFON was concerned, was about a year's time. My own experience and investigation of the matter, though, took place over a number of years. And So that was one reason for the delay. I just kept uncovering more and more facts, and each one was more surprising than the previous. And so this did take a number of years to gather all the information that I'm presenting in the book. And I approached a number of publishers that were very excited about the possibility of a book on this subject because, believe it or not, even though the Stephenville UFO is considered one of the top UFO waves or sightings of all time, there's been nothing else written about it. And so they were very happy to have the prospect of a book on it. However, once they got into my manuscript that was filled with names, places, dates, times, and pointing fingers at folks, I think they backed off. Even the largest publishers are not interested in being mired in lawsuits and that sort of thing. So I decided to get this information out to the public. The best way to do it was in a novel form. And I think that the discerning reader will be able to tell what is there for entertainment purposes and to carry the story along, and what is indeed based on fact.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know that most people have heard about the lights at Marfa and the I guess it was a crash in Aurora, Texas, back at the turn of the century between the late 1800s and 1900, and of course everyone knows about the Phoenix sightings. Is this the first time UFOs were ever sighted in the Stephenville area?
Well, that's a very interesting story in and of itself. I had several hundred people call me from all of the tremendous number of stories that were carried about the Stephenville sighting. Newspaper, magazines, radio interviews, TV interviews. So constantly my name was in the public light there for months. And
you were on Larry King, weren't you?
I was on Larry King. I was on Dateline, NBC's Dateline, the Learning Channel, the History Channel, Fox News affiliates. Really, this was a major story that was covered by every form of media, and not only U.S. based but internationally based. And so I had folks who were witnesses and whistleblowers calling me almost from the first thing in the morning till very late at night, considering that some of them were in far distant time zones. And so they, I think I stopped counting at 150 calls from people.
Wow.
So,
wow.
But it went on for months. And one of the things that was interesting to me was how many older folks, couples, come to mind in their early 80s that would call and say, Mr. Cherry, we want to tell you that, we've lived down here in the Erath County, outside of the city of Stephenville, for all of our lives, or 50, 60 years or somewhat. And they would tell me about a UFO encounter that they had 30, 40, 50 years ago.
Wow.
And that they were afraid to tell people in town, as they put it, because they would think they're crazy. And, so back in those days, people really didn't take anyone seriously who made these kind of claims. But I began to get more and more of those type of calls from folks all over the area out there. And when I say all over the area, the sightings took place really over about a 4-county area. But when you consider, there's about 240 counties in Texas, that's a pretty tight-knit group.
Yeah, I'm going to post in the chat room a map of the state of Texas with that area highlighted. It's pretty much what you'd call the heart of Texas, right?
it is the heart of Texas. I mean, the folks are hardworking. One of the things I was surprised by is that I guess the typical image of people that live out in the country is that they're not as well educated, they're not very sophisticated, and so forth. And much to my surprise, most of the folks were pretty well educated. I mean, many of them had college degrees, they were professionals and this sort of thing. They had grown up in Texas, in small town, rural environment. They had gone off to college, they'd had careers, and when they retired, they came back and settled in their home. Or one thing, the primary industry of Erath County is dairy farming. But most dairy farms are not big enough to support, a family. They're truly small businesses, but they're very labor intensive. Mm-hmm. And so majority of dairy farmers have what they call day jobs. Mm-hmm. And so many of them worked in professions in nearby Waco, or there's a defense plant that they would say up the road. People there didn't think anything about traveling 60, 80 miles to work one way or the other.
Oh, if you're a Texan, you're used to driving like that every day anyway.
Yeah, I remember the first time somebody said, "Let's go to dinner." And we said, "Where are we going?" "Oh, it's just down the road." You get about 80 miles away,
Yeah, we don't think in distance. We think in just getting there. That's all.
Well, and back in those days, you could travel 80 miles an hour and not see anybody on the road for a long, maybe the whole trip. But
and don't forget the Dr. Pepper plant in Dublin.
The Dr. Pepper plant, home of the original Dr. Pepper. So there are a lot of very educated and experienced folks there that we ran into. And so they were very credible. It is a college town as well. It has Carleton State University there. And I'll tell you, we had almost no college students that come to mind that came to the forefront and saying, I saw this UFO or anything. So it was mostly, as I like to call them, us gray-haired folks that were witnesses. I mean, people who are not easily, frightened, or they were more curious than anything.
Not hysterical. Not hysterical. Well, I imagine those college kids were involved in some extracurricular activities and couldn't be bothered.
Well, one of the witnesses that called me, and I won't give his name, but he was a country western star, and he was well up in age. I mean, his the peak of his career was probably in the 70s.
Wow!
But he was coming back from a gig someplace, and he said his band was in a bus, and he and his manager were in a car, and this area out there that's just north of Stephenville in Erath County, they were flying down the highway late at night, I-20, I believe it is, and there's an area there called Ranger Hill that is not much of a hill by most standards, but in that area, that's generally flat, this is a big deal. So anyway, this ball UFO came down right in front of the bus, and kind of hovered there in front of them as they're traveling along. And it was synchronized with the speed of the bus. And as he slowed down, the thing flipped over the bus, went back to the window of the car that this country star was in. And they all came to a halt. I mean, it was unsafe driving. So then the UFO went down the side of this hill out of sight, and for some reason he decides to get out with his .38 and go down the hill. He's going to investigate this thing. And he said then it just shot straight up in the air and then headed off east toward the Fort Worth area. First small town they stopped in to get some gas, there was a state trooper there, talking to some people, and he said, I thought for just a few minutes about going over there and giving him a report, what we had seen, and then he said, nah, all he's gonna he's gonna think, a bunch of musicians, they've been smoking something, and he said we didn't really want to invite that kind of scrutiny, so we just let it go.
And this wasn't recent. This was in the 70s that he's telling you the story about it?
No, I'm saying the height of his career was probably in his. I don't know exactly when it was. He had some signature song that I can't recall offhand. That was, if you heard it, it was a catchy little tune, and then of course he had made his entire career out on that.
But I mean, the event that he's talking about on Ranger Hill. When did that happen? It wasn't like in 2008.
No, it had been just a few years before. But this is one of the many reports of sightings in that area that happened over a long period of time. Actually, I guess the oldest report that we found, and I say we. Got to know Mark Murphy, who is the city councilman for Dublin, the next little town down the road from Stephenville, and as you say, the home of the Dr. Pepper. That's their main claim to fame. I think the town is maybe 3,000-4,000 people, very small. Anyway, Mark was doing some research in this small library they had, which is sort of a combination of the little newspaper, and found I believe it was a microfiche of a calendar of all things that was printed back in early 1900s, right at the turn of the century, and it had on it an account from the little Dublin paper. I guess they used to print all sorts of things on the old calendars, like weather forecasts, this is the anniversary of, all sorts of things. And he found on there a reprint of an article about a sighting that had occurred in Dublin in 1896, I believe it was. Said that a number of townspeople witnessed this flying, what appeared to be a burning bale of hay. Now, when you think about it, describing a UFO incident in 1896 terms, when you've never even seen anything, fly, but a bird, and you're trying to describe this glowing UFO, that would be what you might think of as an image. And at any rate, it crashed into some structure there, wooden structure, and in all of this debris, they found some strange parchment with hieroglyphics on it. And so that was the only way they could relate to this strange writing that was on there. And of course, the story doesn't say what happened to any of the debris or the parchment or any of that sort of thing, unfortunately. But point being is that we found a history of sightings in and around that area that went back at least 120 years, 115 years or so. So, it appears to be an active area. And that was one of the burning questions in my mind that really came from a witness, because a lot of people think in terms of the Stephenville UFO as being an event that took place on, January the 8th of 2008. And actually, it was a series of sightings that took place over a number of months, frankly. So
I think that is news to a lot of people. I do agree with you. I think people think it was a one-time deal.
Right. And one of the witnesses who told me about their own experience then turned to me and asked a question that no one else had asked. Why do you think this thing keeps coming back? And the more I looked into it, the the more that did become one of the central questions. And of course, as I developed inside information from whistleblowers who came forward, I began to realize the significance of that. And I also had these insiders point me in the direction of the answer to that question.
Well,
And
Ken, let me jump in and remind everybody, because we've been going here for a good 25 minutes, and if someone has just stumbled in, they have no idea how important this conversation is. We're talking with Ken Cherry, I am so sorry, Ken Cherry, who is the president and founder of E.P.I.C Voyagers, and he has a brand new book that has just been published. Marc Slade Investigates the Stephenville UFO, and I was just going to ask you, related to what you were saying, this part of Texas is in very, very close proximity to the Bush Ranch, the Texas White House, and also the superconducting super collider down in Waxahachie. And there's a number of military bases and installations surrounding it within probably at least 100-mile radius. So do you think that that geography has anything to do with the sightings?
well, I'm going to be a bit facetious here and answer you by saying yes, it does. No, it doesn't. You're correct in that the Bush Ranch is right there, and we had reporters, it would be investigators from all over saying we were blind. The answer for why the UFO had come there was right in front of our eyes. They were there because of the Bush Ranch and so forth. And of course, the Bushes were not even at home at the time of the, I would say, the day when there was a mass sighting by the people in and around there. So that I hardly think that these intelligent beings, whoever they were, wouldn't have known that. Also, you're right. It's probably, I think, the largest military base in the country and one of the largest concentrations of military in the country in Texas. So, I think all of those things are sort of significant. But as I developed information, I realized that these sightings have occurred in and around there for so long. They preceded the ranch or Bush's home or the military bases or anything else. And so I don't want to give away too much, but I will say this. If you see bees in a field year after year after year, that tells you something.
Oh, now that is an amazing comment. I want you to repeat that. Everybody listen to this. I've never heard a comment like this before. Say it again.
These UFOs didn't just come back time and time again in 2008. We found a pattern and a history of visitation of UFOs there going back at least to the Dublin sighting in 1896. When I say Dublin, I'm talking Dublin, Texas, of course.
Right.
That's right in that area. And so the analogy I would use to make our listeners think a moment is if you see a group of bees in a field year after year after year, if they keep coming back, that tells you something.
Yeah, there's a reason for it.
Yeah, and so that's one of the disclosures that I make in the book, and so I think they'll be shocked to find out. And
you just reminded me of something. Is it possible, or do you know if there's any resources where someone could go back and see if the local indigenous tribes, the Comanche and Cherokee and all the rest of them there in Central Texas, and there were bunches of them, if they ever had sightings and made records of it? Do you know that?
I don't.
That might be interesting for someone to pursue.
Sure. Obviously, if you're going to find signs of it now, it's going to have to be in, in a museum someplace in terms of their pottery or, things of that nature. Obviously, they didn't keep a written record the way we do in books and things. It was more of an oral tradition. So,
or paintings or pictographs or something like that.
Yeah, well, you got me thinking down the road, but I've got two cases, and I want to tell the folks right now. The reason I named this Marc Slade Investigates, and then the Stephenville UFO, is because if the public likes it, if it meets with at least enough good enough reception to justify, I will continue it as a series based on actual cases. And there are at least two that I'm contemplating that do involve Native Americans, and they're both fascinating cases. And one of them is here in Texas. Again, I guess it was something that I was very much involved in, and so it has all the elements, all the cool elements, Indian lore.
That's exciting. I hope you do follow through on that and write that up. I'd love to see that. I have read the book. I had an advanced copy. I want to mention that for listeners. And it is not just entertaining. It is fascinating in the same way that I would describe the X-Files. I was a real X-Files junkie back when they were on TV in the 90s, and I just couldn't wait for the next episode. And it's like a page turner in that way, but I learned so much about things that are not fictional at all from reading the book. And I'd like to mention that you have 17 chapters in the back of the book that are appendices supporting actual information and details that pertain to things that occur in the book.
Right. I wanted to provide something for the hardcore ufologist, and I think even the most experienced of ufologists, and if you've been involved in it for a number of years, will find some new information there, and also will provide a basis for some of the events that occur in the novel that may help to convince some of the skeptics of the plausibility. So, I think there's something there for everyone. If you or just love a good conspiracy story, a good detective novel, or if you're a hardcore ufologist, the main thing is, I would say, the resistance will be, I've seen this story about the Stephenville UFO so many times, I already know about it. And what I want to say is that the story was not done justice by, Larry King, bless his soul. He is one of the few high-profile newsmen who has tried to really dig into the UFO mystery. But he and the UFO hunters, chasing UFOs, any number of other channels and programs that have gone into the Stephenville UFO have approached it solely from the same direction. They trot out Steve Allen, which I found to be a very credible and honorable man. I liked him personally right off the bat.
Now Steve Allen, so that you're mentioning, is a witness and not Steve Allen of radio and comedy.
Steve Allen was the first witness to be brave enough to come forward. He went into the newspaper there, the Stephenville Empire Tribune, and in Stephenville, and sought out a truly cub reporter to tell his story about the sighting that he and a couple of his companions had. And it was a remarkable story, and she convinced her editor to publish it. And actually, that would probably have died right there had it not been for the fact that well, I'll take some credit here, but I received a phone call on the 10th when the story was published from Angela K. Brown, who was her post was with the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, but she was really an AP reporter. Angela knew that I was the contact in Texas for MUFON, called me up and said, "Hey, have you seen this story in the Stephenville paper? Do you place any credibility on it? What are your thoughts?" and so forth. And I filled her in that we had already experienced a significant increase in reported sightings in and around Stephenville, beginning back in December of '07, and that yes, this sounded like the other reports we'd had. And, the people weren't next door neighbors. They were pretty spread out by location. So that when you have that many reports that are that similar, then it's significant. And so we were intending to go down there and interview a bunch of witnesses and so forth. Well, it was Angela's report on the AP wires that took the story national and then international and made it a phenomenon. I mean, a real flap. So, all due respect to the Stephenville paper, they printed the story, but it was really the AP reporter that made it a huge sensation.
That's when it caught fire.
That's when it caught fire. And I was just amazed at it.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No,
I was just going to say something about the book itself, and I'm not going to give away anything, but I want to say a couple of things. First of all, one of the things that I found really interesting are some of the tributes and comments you've got on the very front cover. Whitley Strieber himself, part of one of the comments that's inside the book, he says, "Chillingly possible." And of course, the entire back cover, Jim Mars, our esteemed colleague in Epic Voyagers, has written a tribute. You've got one from Dr. Rita Louise has written a comment, right? Who were the others that have added comments?
Skip Hollingsworth is the executive, publisher of the Texas Monthly Magazine, which is probably the premier it is the premier magazine here in Texas. And actually, it is so highly regarded that Texas Monthly, and particularly Skip Hollingsworth's stories, are monitored by these interns at the major movie studios in Hollywood. Skip has any number of his stories that are optioned out as movies. As a matter of fact, when he wrote the story about me in Texas Monthly, that was back when my phone was ringing off the hook anyway, and I had newly installed a caller ID, and so one day the phone rang, which was, I just barely put it down. I looked on the caller ID, and it said Paramount, and I thought, well, I don't know who that is. It's some insurance company or or something, some marketer. But I picked it up anyway, and this person identified themselves as the assistant to producer Scott Aversano, and I didn't know who Mr. Aversano was, but she said he's on his way back from a movie opening in London, and he read this story about you in the Texas Monthly. He's on the airplane now.
Wow.
And he contacted me and said for me to get in touch with you as soon as possible because he wants to discuss, your life rights to make a major motion picture about this incident. And I didn't really, I couldn't fathom all this. I couldn't quite take it all in. One of the things she said was, though, you can't talk to Mr. Aversano without an agent.
Oh my.
And so, I mean, the whole experience for about a year, while this was getting so much publicity, was just really quite overwhelming. And I did manage, after searching around, to get an agent with William Morris, and they're probably the top agency in Hollywood. Anyway, Mr. Aversano was in a production partnership with Scott Rudin, and they produced the movie No Country for Old Men, which was an Academy Award winner.
Excellent movie.
Yeah, and they had done a number of other projects together, but at one point, I talked to Aversano several times over a period of a year, and I had told him who I wanted to play me, and first I asked him if I could play my character, kind of laughing. He went away, just said no. And so I suggested someone, and he says, no, we're going to get a real actor, Tommy Lee Jones.
Wow.
And he said, we're going to make it sort of like a No Country for Old Men meets Men in Black.
Oh, that sounds like a good movie.
So, I guess Tommy Lee was in No Country for Old Men, of course, and so I guess Rudin and Aversano had him under contract. But I thought that was kind of interesting. Another native Texan guy playing me, that was kind of cool. So
it's very appropriate. Very appropriate.
Yeah.
And while you mentioned Men in Black, there are Men in Black in the book.
Right.
And like I said, I don't want to give anything away because people really need to get this book and read it, because it's going to be made into a movie, and I don't have any doubt of that. But let me just read something.
I do want to finish a point that was
I'm sorry.
that I started rambling on some time ago, was that the fact that every time anybody has presented the story, they've brought out the same cast of characters, and I mean that respectfully. Steve Allen, the Constable Leroy Gayton, and the reporter Angelia, and her last name escapes me at the moment. But at any rate, so they tell their story about seeing this enormous craft, and so people think that's it. That's it. That's the whole story. And in fact, that isn't even the tip of the iceberg. And so what I focus on, and deliberately don't begin with Steve Allen's sighting or Officer Gayton, who saw it later in the evening, or other, I began with one of the other reports that we had, and because there were many, many, many credible people who came forward. And that was important, I thought, to bring out. But at any rate, the story that I tell, I guarantee you're probably only familiar with two chapters in there. One, I kind of give a brief history of Stephenville and Erath County, and the other is I do kind of have a short chapter devoted to the actual event that was reported widely with Steve Allen. So, but the rest of the other 340 pages or so are devoted to brand new information. Mm-hmm. And so, you were asking me about Men in Black. So,
well, no, I wanted to point out that there are Men in Black in the book. Tangentially, it's not like they're a focal point either, but I want to read a statement from the back cover, and I'm not giving anything away. I'm just reading something on the back cover. It says, "This is a fascinating and frightening tale of sinister plots and shadow government agencies vying for control of the country." So if that doesn't give you just a little bit of a desire to know more about the book, it's not just about UFOs. It just is not about UFOs and that's it. This is not like anything you've ever seen on the cable channel shows about UFOs. I will give you at least that much of a testimonial. Kenneth, I think we've got about, 10 minutes left before we have to break. I want to sneak in a couple of quick questions. Have you ever had your own UFO encounter?
I have, and I sneak that into the book. And the reason I want to make the point that, yes, I've had my own encounter is because there was a time during the investigation that I was accused of being a skeptic and there to cover up, what had truly happened. And I'm not a skeptic. I just need proof. I need, I'm not a person that's okay. I want to go beyond just what I'm told, and at any rate, I think it probably came as a surprise to people, or would come to a surprise. So some people will read this book thinking that, first of all, they'll be looking for their own character there, and the other is that they'll think that I'm trying to cover up or mislead people about what happened. But at any rate, no. When I was a youngster, about 8 years old, we lived on a ranch in what was then and now Duncanville, just south of Dallas. But it was scrub ranch land back in those days, and now it's middle class, upper middle class area. So it might be interesting for people to know that. Anyway, back in those days, kids were pretty independent, especially kids that lived on farms and ranches and so forth. So, we would be out on our own even at a young age for most of the day, without our, probably got our drink of water out of the water hose rather than running back into the house even. I mean, we just spent a lot of time outdoors. But at any rate, it was a pretty isolated area, mostly scrub trees, but one of our open fields I walked into, and I looked up, and there was this strange object going across, slowly across the skyline there. Didn't appear to be that far away. I can't really judge at this point, but I can only describe it as a silvery object, in terms of my thoughts then as an 8-year-old. I didn't have a lot of experience with seeing craft flying, so I couldn't, I didn't come to any opinion about what it was, except next thing I know that there's this apparently one of our early jets, this would have been in the early 50s, excuse me, that just was diving out of the sky toward this thing. And the next thing I saw was either the sun glinting off of it, I don't know what. It appeared almost like something from the silvery craft to the jet, and the pilot ejected suddenly from the aircraft.
Wow.
And the plane crashed, of course, and everything, and the silvery object, which would have been a UFO, today's terms, or flying saucer back then, if I'd have known what to call it, just took off. And it was pretty sparsely populated back in those days in that area, and but the few neighbors that we ran into, or I overheard conversations. It was another thing about those days. Children were to be seen and not heard. So these is not conversations that I took part in, but overheard conversation. It was a big buzz for some time about people going out to rescue this pilot, from the trees. His parachute had hung up in the trees.
I can imagine.
And apparently no one that I heard about or knew of witnessed this encounter between this jet and this UFO. Huh. So we were At one point, there was a directive all the way from, the president's office to our military that if these things wouldn't land, that they were to shoot them down. I mean, there have been articles written in magazine. I recall seeing this: shoot them down. Well, at one point, I recall reading that we were losing a plane a day somewhere in the world from this attempts to shoot down or force these UFOs to land. And, it was only after many, many losses on our side to no avail that the order was rescinded. So apparently we were still in that shoot them down mental framework back then. Right. So anyway, I hate to belabor it, but it was such an incredible event that it's like everybody knows where they were when John F. Kennedy was assassinated, and this is something that I would never forget either. Mm-hmm. And so
that's a remarkable story, and you as a little kid, of course, it would stick with you forever.
It was like I was watching a movie screen up there. Mm-hmm. I mean, I hate to say that because it may cast doubt on the validity of what I'm saying, but I'm just trying to draw this image. It was just there. It was like it was for me. It was this tremendous event that should have been witnessed by hundreds, if not thousands of people, and yet it was me and my dog.
Well, you're just lucky you weren't abducted. I'll just say that much.
Right.
Before we have to break, I want to ask you a quick question then. Do you think, I mean, we've been talking about you saw something, and we know all the stories about Roswell, we know about Blue Book. Do you think that there is some kind of censorship or a disinformation campaign going on about UFOs and ETs? And do you have examples in the book that actually relate from the facts in the Stephenville case?
The answer to that is twofold: yes and no.
Oh, you're so complicated.
Yes, I believe there is censorship, and no, I can't think of a specific incident where I go into that. I believe that I sort of weave that in a priori of the conspiracy, but I don't really focus on that. But I will say this: one of my good friends, who's very well known, had connections with the CBS. Well, just go ahead and disclose that. But one of the newscasters of the glory days of CBS, and he were good friends, and they said, there was only two types of stories that had to go to their censors for the news, and this newscaster was a Texan, by the way. At any rate, there were terrorist attacks and UFO stories. And he said the terrorist attacks, we could understand because, you don't want to accidentally give any kind of usable information to terrorists. This was back in the day where, they don't want to tell them how effective the bomb was, how many people it killed, or, they wanted to give the authorities the edge in terms of, okay, so that's fine. But he never once saw a UFO story approved for, and so, yeah, there has been some change, I believe, with the news. You see it on a local level more so, but even that represents a relaxation of the censorship standards. I think more of what occurs now, and it's more in the print and the blogs and the internet and all of this sort of thing, is that there's an intentional misdirection, more so than trying to cover up. It's pretty difficult to cover up lots of things nowadays because there's so many people with camera phones and whatnot. But what they do is they'll discredit it, one way or the other. And it's amazing. The pictures are always almost too blurry, or they're too good to be real.
Mm-hmm.
But I saw that with the Stephenville event, that some of the reporters became either witting or unwitting tools. I use that advisedly, of the folks who wanted to, manipulate the news, and in part to kind of discredit it, dismiss it. And so I get that answer. Hopefully that answers that part. But I don't really dwell on that in the book. I know some people realize I had sort of a bit of a contentious relationship with some of the reporters, and to my way of thinking, they were part of the disinformation that was being put out there. And I don't necessarily think that they completely realized it. But anyway, there was a manipulation of the story.
Well, I can see how something like this could completely make a person's, maybe not their whole career, but put them in a prominent spot to garner a lot of attention to themselves because it's such a big story. We've got just a little over a minute until we have to take a break, Ken. So let me, I'm going to ask you when we come back to give us an overview of the real investigation, and then we're going to jump into talking about the book itself, the book being Marc Slade Investigates, the Stephenville UFO, a brand new book out by Ken Cherry, the president and founder of E.P.I.C Voyagers. And I invite you to go to the website, epicvoyagers.com. There is a promo right on the front page about the book. You'll see the cover of the book. And we've got a link there to the E.P.I.C Voyagers bookstore where you can actually buy an autographed copy and have it shipped to you, all expenses, taxes, everything covered for $17. And take a look at it. If you feel like it's pretty interesting, you can click on that button and go through PayPal. We're going to be back in just about 2 or 3 minutes with Ken asking a few more questions, and we'll be taking questions from the chat room and Skype. So join us back.
You're listening to IRN, the Inception Radio Network, Chicago, Illinois.
Hello, Inception Radio Network listeners. Would you like your favorite show to be played live on air? Well, now the choice is in your hands with IRN's Live Request Portal, an easy way to request your favorite show with a simple click. IRN's Live Request Portal now gives you exclusive access to all the shows. How easy is it? Simply type a show name or a guest name, click request, and even write a dedication message. That's it. Try it now. Simply visit InceptionRadioNetwork.com, click on the Live Request tab under the show menu. Playing your favorite show is just a mouse click away.
Don't have a computer? Is your internet connection down? Don't worry. Use your trusty cell phone or landline and call into our listen line at 401-283-6700 to listen to the Inception Radio Network 24/7. Again, that call-in number is 401-283-6700. For the Inception Radio Network, I am MJ.
Are you a fan of Inception Radio Network? Do you reckon it's the best alternative talk radio station on the planet? Well, if you do, head to facebook.com/Inception Radio Network and like the page. Tell your friends, spread the word, and keep listening to the best.
You didn't forget what's coming up tonight, did you? Hi, Inception Radio Network listeners. This is Amanda. Never miss that interview you were looking forward to or the show on your favorite topic. Follow IRN on Twitter, I_R_N, and get reminders about the evening's live shows as well as fun and important updates throughout the week. That's I_R_N, and never miss a great show again.
Hi, Can you hear my voice? Imagine how many other people can hear it too. If you have advertising needs, then look no further. The Inception Radio Network currently has openings for on-air advertisements and radio show sponsorships. Given any thought to your target demographic? Inception has you covered there too. Advertising on a network gives you multiple opportunities to advertise on a wide variety of radio show broadcasts, and we have one to fit every advertising need. You know, in recent years, internet radio has exhibited a phenomenal listener growth. An Arbitron Edison survey shows that online radio boosts at least 33 million unique visitors each week and 54 million each month. And that number amazingly continues to grow. And these listeners are a part of many businesses' core demographics. And surveys have shown that internet radio listeners are far more likely than regular radio listeners to spend money on a whole range of activities. You know, internet listeners vote, they dine out and eat fast food, and they grab a cup of coffee. And here's the interesting one. They buy items online at a much higher rate than all other market segments combined. Internet radio also enables businesses to connect with consumers during work hours, where increasingly more lifestyle decisions are being made. Advertise with the best. The Inception Radio Network offers competitive advertising rates to fit just about anyone's advertising budget. Stop by today at www.inceptionradionetwork.com or call us toll-free at 1-888-919-2355. Get the word out. Get results with the Inception Radio Network.
Hello, Inception Radio Network listeners. This is Amanda. Remember, you can take your Inception Radio shows on the go. Just download the Inception Radio Network app for your iPhone, iPad, or Android smartphones and access live shows, past shows, guest lineups, and much more. Just visit the iTunes Store or the Google Play Marketplace and download it today for free.
Howdy, this is Joe Mars. I'm inviting you to tune in to Epic Voyages, 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern, Monday nights, right here on Inception Radio Network. To find out more about Epic and how you can become a member, visit epicvoyagers.com. That's EPICVOYAGERS.com.
Welcome back, everybody, to Epic Voyages Radio here on Inception Radio Network. If you missed the first hour, be sure to check back here at Inception Radio Network for the archive, because we're talking with Ken Cherry, the founder and president for Epic Voyagers, and we're talking to him about his brand new book that I just saw today is available on Amazon, called Marc Slade Investigates, the Stephenville UFOs. Now, Ken also has autographed copies available at our website, epicvoyagers.com, and Glannet Ty, GLANNANTTY.com. Also, the publisher has copies available, so you should have absolutely no problem whatsoever finding a copy of the book. I will warn you, it is a long book. It's about 350, 360 pages long. And Ken, before we get done tonight, I really want to talk about the appendices, which are fact versus fiction, 17 chapters, because I thought that was one of the most useful resources in the book. It's not at all fiction. It's not a novel. It's actually relating what you talk about in the novel to what's really going on out there based on your years of experience as the Texas State Director for MUFON all those many years. So, Ken, welcome back. Let me give one more thing out. The number, dial-in number for questions tonight with Ken is 888-919-2355. Of course, you can go to the chat room at Inception Radio Network and type in a question, or go to Inception Radio Network on Skype and send us one that way. So, Ken, I hope you got a cup of coffee or something for the next hour.
I'm here. I'm awake.
Okay.
I'm having fun.
Well, I'd like for you. We're not going to talk a whole lot longer about the actual events in Stephenville, but there's a few things I really do want you to mention about the actual investigation that took place from January 2008. As I understand it, at least many months later on towards the end of the year. Can you tell me, first of all, when you got to Stephenville and Dublin, how would you describe the actual vibe or the psychological atmosphere among the locals there when you and your team arrived?
Well, as I explained earlier, these were mostly gray-haired folks, so you didn't see people doing handstands or anything like that. They were, I would say, excited in a muted sort of way. Very curious. They all really just wanted to know what they had seen. I think they were very excited about the prospect of it actually being, a UFO that could have been from someplace else and other than our own planet. And one of the, I think, reasons it's often cited for, not coming clean on the UFO phenomena is that people can't handle it. But I'll tell you what, when we got to talking to these folks, I found a very level-headed outlook about it all. With the people today, I think, could accept the idea and actually take it for granted that in a universe that there has to be other intelligent life. And, of course, that's what most people wanted to know. Is this from someplace else? And, of course, the flip side of that, is it one of ours or was it a natural phenomena or what? But, really, there was a bit of a carnival atmosphere by outsiders. And it was almost like someone was trying to make this into kind of a carnival type of thing. There were carloads of people that came up from Austin and from Dallas that wore tinfoil hats. And,
oh my goodness!
Dressed up like aliens. They had their little dogs with costumes on. But you know what? Those were all outsiders, and who were just, I think, trying to take advantage of the situation.
Well, they were probably trying to get caught on film, and they could see themselves at 10 o'clock in the news.
Exactly. And, I guess the term nowadays would be photobombing.
Yep.
But the people who came there as witnesses, they would sit there and just matter-of-factly give us a very detailed descriptions of what they saw and what their emotions were like. A number of them had their pets with them, their dogs primarily, and they would tell what the effect was on the pet, and it was just like, here are the facts, So these were not a bunch of people who were hysterical or anything like that in the beginning. So, it was, I was really quite surprised. So, pleasantly, of course.
So obviously, no outright hysteria.
No. As I said, if there was any hysteria, it was among the media who were there and these people who came up, I think, for the purpose of really turning it into some sort of a carnival. What's funny is, of course, it was mostly younger people who came there dressed up and so forth and added to that atmosphere, the kind of a carnival atmosphere. I keep using that, but I can't think of anything else. When people are dressed up like clowns and with things on their head and face and whatnot. But the media they were pretty amazing too. I had one crew that came from New York. They said that they were in the middle of filming a documentary for, I forget what network it was, and they were told to get on a plane and get to Dublin the next day. I mean, just stop shooting. And There was one correspondent there for Japanese network. There was a reporter there from a large San Francisco newspaper. I mean, these folks came from all over the country. And so that AP wire just lit up the newsrooms apparently everywhere it was seen. And we did publish the notice about our meeting there to interview witnesses because there were simply too many of them to interview one at a time. And so, we had to have this central place. And, of course, wow, that was just sort of like a magnet for people from all over. One of the Dr. Pepper officials, the plant manager who made the arrangements for us there at the Rotary Club, told me that there were 500 people in that room.
Wow. And
it was so full that we could see people coming to the front door and they would turn away because there just wasn't any place for them to stand. Mm-hmm. The guy just was kind of shaking his head. He said, "I don't think we've ever had more than 200 people in this room."
As good as Dr. Pepper is.
Exactly. And I got to tell you, this little town of Dublin still has some of those brick roads that were built, late in the Depression era, on the work programs, dusty brick road. I mean, just the coolest place for some of the off streets, mm-hmm. for a period movie. You would still think you were in the 30s or 40s.
Oh,
but
yeah.
We created a traffic jam in the town. There were so many people driving in from everywhere. It was hard to find a place to park anywhere in this downtown quote unquote area. And so, I was really sort of amazed at the turnout of this thing. Not so much the number of witnesses. We expected quite a few, but the interest from around the world was just incredible, amazing, overwhelming.
Ken, I don't know that you said this yet, but the original venue for this this interview and this meeting, and folks, I mean, we're talking Texas here. Ken's right. A Texan. I'm a native Texan. Any of you out there that are native Texans, you know exactly what I'm getting ready to say here. You'll understand. Tell us what the original venue was that could hold a large number of people.
Well, we had just a few days to try to line up a venue, and so we called around to schools and churches and all sort of things, and really there was nothing available on that sort of a notice, and frankly some of the places want to be paid this huge sum of money, and we didn't have it to pay them. So finally someone who ran a cattle auction barn offered to let us use this auction barn, but the problem was it had been full of cows, for an auction the night before and hadn't been cleaned up. So, you better wear your boots and your high waders if you were going to attend that one, because there was still a lot of cow residue all over the place. And anyway, that would have been really, something
rustic. Let's call it rustic.
Rustic. That's a good way to describe it. But I had a call from the plant manager of the Dr. Pepper plant there in Dublin, and he said, I hear you're going to have your meeting in the cattle barn there. And Stephen said, that's no place to have a meeting. He said, we'll offer you the use of the Rotary Club, and we'll host it, and we'll bring Dr. Pepper, the original Dr. Pepper, of course, not the stuff you get in the supermarket, and popcorn. He said, we'll supply the refreshments. I'm telling you, many gallons of Dr. Pepper were drank that day. But that is the original energy drink. If you drink one of the original Dr. Peppers, a couple of those, and you've got a buzz on for the rest of the day. And it's made with real sugar, and
honest to goodness sugar, not sugar corn syrup, but the real thing. It's
a cane sugar, and it's and the syrup is thicker too than the regular Dr. Peppers you get in, that are made at the Pepsi plants and wherever up here in North Texas. Anyway, he had no idea what he was getting into when he offered to host this thing, but it all went pretty well. And one of the pictures you showed earlier had not only my team with me standing up front there with a blazer on, and but a few of the Dr. Pepper folks in the background there who were hosting us. So
you look like a bunch of graduates from some sort of elementary school 7th grade program or something.
There you go.
Well, let me give out our number again in case somebody wants to call in and talk to you personally. 888-919-2355. Call in and talk to Ken Cherry about his new book, Marc Slade Investigates, the Stephenville UFOs. And just in the next 10-15 minutes, Ken, I want you to give us a little bit of teaser about the book. But first of all, how long did the actual investigation last, and how many actual people, investigators for MUFON, did you assign to this?
Well, the official investigation lasted for right at a year. We have really started looking into these a huge increase in the number of sightings in December of 2007, and they continued sporadically excuse me throughout 2008, and then we had another mass sighting, not a mass number of UFOs, but a mass sighting again in October of 2008, and then the details of that investigation ran, through the balance of a year. So the actual investigation lasted right at a full year with MUFON, but my own investigation continued for 2.5, 3 years afterwards. And some of the sources that I had, though, I had gained over a number of years while I was in MUFON, and even one prior to my involvement with MUFON. But initially, we had 7 investigators plus my chief investigator, and myself, and a radar/FOIA expert, FOIA meaning Freedom of Information Act, and it really, it's a specialty all in of its own there as to how to go about requesting the type of technical data that we needed, and so requesting radar information. So in the beginning, there were 10 of us. Bear in mind, though, that MUFON operates on the back of volunteers, and so some of those investigators didn't follow the case all the way through. We had others who came in at later times, and then a couple were fired, and new ones joined us. So, I would say over the year's time, there were probably, now I'm thinking about additional scientific support that we had. There were probably 18 to 20 people,
wow,
all told over a year's time. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, it was quite a lot that went into it. And,
and it wasn't exactly what you would call a smooth paved road throughout the investigation.
No, and we ran into roadblocks constantly. One of the irritants, I suppose, and without naming any names or any specific person, we were constantly having problems with the media who wanted to be involved in the investigation, who would try to preempt us with the witnesses or make themselves intermediaries with witnesses or somehow or another embed themselves in the story. And so that complicated matters. There were a couple of other bigger issues, though. At the meeting, when we had asked for, the investigators who were able to come and volunteer to travel there, I wasn't exactly sure who would answer the call until the day that we actually met there in Dublin. And at any rate, we had one female investigator who said that she had just moved there from California and she didn't have her credentials with her. You carry an ID card that says, what your job position is and move on. And she should have had one that said field investigator, but she was the only female investigator we had, and we had quite a few ladies that we felt, might feel more at ease talking to her or whatever. In other words, we were desperate. But anyway, we had so many folks there. So we accepted her on the basis of her word that, she was a field investigator. It turns out that she was not. She was, she was she had attended some class on UFO field investigation that they claim was equivalent of MUFON training.
Oh, for goodness sakes.
And this gal started putting herself out as an expert on the Stephenville UFO and offering, to do speaking things at conferences and whatnot. At any rate, we ended up firing her for misrepresentation. Of course, she wasn't even qualified. And we got in touch with the school, and of course they said, look, we never told her that, this is going to make her move on. Anyway, that's way too much information probably. The biggest problem, however, was with our radar FOIA expert. He had sent me his credentials by email the night before the meeting, and we had a number of folks who were vetted consultants for MUFON in various scientific fields. And this gentleman had outstanding credentials, and he asked if he could be my radar FOIA expert. And so he was traveling from Colorado. And I said, yeah, he was well qualified. Why not? So we met at the meeting there in Dublin, and I welcomed him aboard, shook hands with him, and he very enthusiastically said, I appreciate the opportunity to work with you, yada, yada. I'll be back in touch soon. We only have a few days to file for the FOIA request for the radar, and I'll be back with you. Well, that was the last time I ever heard from him.
Oh, for goodness sakes.
And so that was just one of the many obstacles and roadblocks that I kept running into with my own organization. And I would call headquarters, talk to the international director. We got into screaming matches. Not really screaming match, but I was upset. Let's put it that way. And he would assure me, you're in charge. I'll talk to everybody. I don't, yada, yada. Nothing happened. And then we would talk to key witnesses, and they would say, look, somebody's already been here. They told us not to cooperate with you. They said they're from your headquarters. Get your act together was the term, what a couple of them said. And so because we were shut off from some witnesses and cut off from critical data that we needed, we were constantly being hammered in the newspaper by one particular reporter, what's going on? Why is it taking so long? Blah, blah, blah. And she was constantly printing stories that were really, there was no substantiation whatsoever anybody at that point who would give her, some interesting UFO sighting that, they say they had witnessed. And just to kind of quell some of the criticism, a couple of my investigators solved several of the stories that she had printed. And, of course, that just generated more heat from her. The problem was that a spokesperson for MUFON would go on the radio on interviews with this person. And it seemed to lend credibility to her and, that we were, incompetent, lax, and so forth. So there's this just building. I'm not, I'm patient to a point, but then after that, I was ready to blow. So I confronted the board of directors and so forth. But it was at that point, trying to understand what was going on, I started investigating my own organization and came to some shocking conclusions that, excuse me just a moment, that after I left MUFON, I decided that the public needed to know about. And so this was the basis for the tell-all. And as I dug deeper and deeper, I found that this was just I guess, again, the term tip of the iceberg. I mean, and it became pretty clear at a given point, due to the nature of some of my whistleblowers, informants, whatever, I really couldn't use real names at that point, so it had to become a novel. But at any rate, I guess that's pretty much it as far as the overall MUFON investigation. As I mentioned earlier, I personally took a couple of hundred calls from people. I know I stopped counting at 150. They just kept pouring in. Every time a story would appear in a magazine or newspaper or TV news program or radio talk show, I'd get a number of calls from people who were witnesses. But once in a while, I get that real nugget of information from somebody. I know I mentioned my caller ID earlier, and one was from DOD. I really didn't even know what DOD meant at that point. But is this Mr. Cherry? Yes. Just a moment. Let me close my door. And this gentleman would tell me something that, just made my jaw drop, and obviously I couldn't use this man's name. He was an active member. And then I got some information from a retired CIA agent who actually is one of the characters in my book, and something from an NSA contractor who's still quite active, and another person. I honestly don't know what his position is, but I know it's very high up in the power circles in D.C. So, I mean, just if anybody reads the book and thinks that any of these scenarios are too far-fetched, I would just tell you that for the most part, they're based on very credible people's claims, and you stop me anytime you want here at some point, but I'll just keep talking if you like. But
I was going to ask you. I'm getting a little concerned about your voice, and I know that in an interview, I want you to talk, but I also don't want you to go into laryngitis here. So, Where I would like to go next, though, Ken, is if you could pretend that you've just bought this book and you've read it, and you've run into somebody who's a good friend of yours, and you're trying to tell them a brief overview about the book that would make them want to go buy it. Can you give us just a real a high-level overview of what is going on in this book? Because it is so much more than UFOs or ETs, or I mean, it's. I think I said earlier, it's like an X-Files episode. Only it's more than that. So do you have enough of your throat left right now to give us a real brief overview?
Right. And let me think about this for a moment. But I give the name of an organization that was formed shortly after Blue Book closed down, and I'm assuming that most of our audience is familiar with Blue Book, but it was the Air Force's investigation of UFOs that they, in the end, concluded, there's nothing to see here, go away, and they closed it down. But shortly after that government official investigation thing, a UFO group that was formed that was completely infiltrated by alphabet agency type folks, and I give the name and some of the people involved in it in the book. Well, I guess really what I want people to know is that there are UFOs, obviously. And, some are ours, some are not ours, and some are operated jointly. And we've had a program for a very long time, but there are very powerful people who are trying to keep that information from the public. And to the extent that they can't keep it out of the media, that they're trying to control it, using disinformation or intimidation or whatever they can, I guess that's the central point of the book. It's just the fact that here's the greatest secret in history, probably, that's being kept from us. And there are people who believe that it should be disclosed, and there are people who are just dead set against it. And, it's when you hear both their sides of the argument, sometimes it's very difficult to decide, who's right and who's wrong, because with disclosure brings possibly some very massive changes in the way the world operates. And one of the things, and I'll relate this back to the actual investigation, one of the things that we saw with this constant bombardment by the press, by television, by this focus from all over the world on this small community, is that every time a new a sighting, individual sighting, or a new story appeared in Stephenville, our sighting reports in volume increased. And over time, some of the people who started out as being very reliable witnesses started seeing UFOs everywhere. I mean, I think what happened was that people became hyper aware. In other words, they were looking up at the sky for more intently than probably they ever had, and then suddenly there were things that they couldn't understand up there, because maybe, and a lot of them were natural phenomena. But one evening, Dr. Bruce Maccabee, who is our photo expert, and Bill Burns, who is a PhD, and myself. Bill Burns was the I guess, the brains, the lead in the series UFO Hunters, and has extensive experience with UFOs. I mean, he has UFO magazine, everything. So, man's like an encyclopedia of UFO cases. And we were sitting around just discussing what was going on there in Stephenville, and Dr. McAbee was the first one to mention it, that there was a type of hysteria that had taken over there, and he had seen it before, and Burns and I both agreed, yeah. So the mood changed with the intensity of the coverage, and people's perception changed from what had been early on, and I'm not saying everybody, but just in general what we experience. So there's a case. It's
like a heightened sensitivity, right?
Sure. And so there's a case that can be made by both the people who feel that we should disclose and people who feel that we shouldn't disclose, because initially the reaction was quite good. I mean, the people just were, they were just curious. They want to know, hey, are they aliens? What are they? I mean, we could accept that. They were all cool with it. But as time went on, you could see that the reality of it, or the possibility of the reality of it, will affect people in their daily lives. And so, it's kind of hard to know which side to come down on once you've really investigated all the aspects of it. But, I guess I'm one of those people who would vote for disclosure. I just think it's something that everybody should know. So anyway, I've added my voice to those folks who are clamoring for disclosure, and I try to give some examples of things that have happened to people in the past who were well known in ufology. Some of the things that have happened to them, some of the mysterious deaths and accidents, quote unquote, and so forth. And I mean, even one of the sources that I had died of what his family felt were suspicious circumstances, and he had actually been approached by Men in Black. So,
wow,
yeah.
Well, I still want to get back to this overview, but we've got a question from Rachel in the chat room. I think this is going to tickle you, because I'm very interested to hear how you're going to answer this question. Ken, where did you write your book? At home or somewhere else? And I have a picture in my mind right now of Stephen King locking himself up in a hotel in Maine. And if you did write it at home, how did you keep? I love this part. How did you keep from getting distracted?
I did, and I didn't. No.
It's not an easy thing to do, is it?
It is not. And actually, the book is about the fourth, fifth generation. Because, as I said, as I gained new insight, new information, it changed completely. I mean, for 25 years, I wrote a private wealth newsletter. And so my background is in finance and economics, and I was much more used to using charts and graphs and, economic history and so forth. And so my writing was pretty, fact-based and dry, with my background as an analyst. But it became pretty clear at some point that it wasn't going to fly like that. So, we had to weave all those facts and things together as an interesting story. But I found that it fell together. It was odd at times. I'd wake up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I would come and sit at my desk and just write page after page after page. The words just flowed. So,
creative spurts.
Well, yeah, it was like I never really stopped working on it, but I did have a home-based business, and so I had to kind of find a way to balance the two. But in the end, the business lost. I was ready to retire anyway. So, but the year that I investigated this, that worked in this investigation intensely, I mean, the income of my business dropped more than in half, and so there were some other health contributing factors with my wife, but we felt it was time to give up the work and pursue this.
Yeah. Well, you got to make a decision. You can't be split between two big projects like that.
No, and what I had done for almost 40 years, frankly, I was tired of it. I was ready to move on and move on. I had taken on as a hobby, and because I found it fascinating because of some of the experiences that I'd had. But here I was handling wealthy people's money, and I never really made it public that here I was this UFO investigator, which is kind of funny because I was winding down my business in late 2008, and all of these stories have been appearing, and some of my biggest clients called me just laughing. They never, they had never envisioned me as this UFO investigator. They thought I was the least likely person they'd ever met,
Mm-hmm. Just didn't fit the bill.
No, I didn't fit the profile. Or, this geek in a basement or, whatever.
Like now I'm thinking of the lone gunman in the X-Files.
There you go.
Yeah. Well, before I want to ask you some specifics about the book, but first of all, I'm going to correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but a real brief overview from my point of view of the book is we've got Marc Slade. First of all, the events happen, and Marc Slade is in charge of investigating them. He goes to Stephenville, and then all of this strangeness starts with the organization, and he winds up meeting an elderly man who says, there's more to this than you think there is. And then he meets an elderly woman. He winds up going to D.C., and he comes back, and all of a sudden he finds himself right in the middle of groups who want very much to disclose what's been happening, and groups who would do anything at all, including murder, to keep that from happening. And the rest of the book is him sort of riding this wave of between the two groups. Is he going to fall prey to the ones who want to do the disclosure side in, or is the disclosure side going to win? He does have his own interaction with the men in black. He has his interaction with more than a couple of assassins. And one of the coolest parts of the plot, he winds up going down into the super collider complex in Waxahachie, which is just a stone's throw from Stephenville, and he finds all kinds of things that have been hidden there for a long time, and then they try to kill him again. So it's just one thing after the other, and it's just really, it's a page turner.
Well, every hero has to get beaten up and shot at.
And he does his share of getting beaten up and shot at.
He has his share, but, he's a former Marine. He can take it. So, I'd say you gave a pretty good summation. You almost gave the whole book away, but that's fine.
No, the book is the details. Now, tell me, who really is Marc Slade? Is this supposed to be you?
Well... Probably 30 years ago, I might have fit the bill, I suppose. But yeah, I guess everybody writes from their own perspective, and I saw or see things through Mark's eyes. So I guess that would be a former self. I am a former Marine. Some of the qualities that he had. He was the head of an organization that was for the scientific study of UFOs for the benefit of mankind. Sort of similar to my experience, and he does run into loggerheads with his superiors in this organization, and so there's a lot of similarity there, and I'd have to say that 99% of the folks involved with the Stephenville case, whether they be reporters, investigators, whomever, the scientists, we had a number of them, would not recognize this story because they're the proverbial blind man, trying to describe an elephant. I was just lucky enough to be in this unique position to see the entirety of the story. And, I'm not even saying that with the grasp I have of it, that's 100%. I mean, I'm sure that there are other participants in this thing that probably have an even more clear picture than I've presented here. But I think that the broad brushstrokes are there. And so, and quite a lot of fun details as well. So,
yeah, definitely.
Definitely, there are characters in the book that are based on real people. The elderly gentleman in the book, he's kind of cool. He's in his 70s. He wears designer suits, may even have a ponytail pulled back or something. I see him sort of as this old but deadly, David Carradine type of character, in the book. Always calm, cool, collected, and everything. But he is based on an individual, actually, that I knew through a school buddy who was his father, and my school buddy was oh God, I don't know how to put it, Hellraiser. He never really quite met up to his father's expectations in any regard. I think he saw himself as a rebel. Anyway,
say he's a free spirit.
Yeah, he was a free spirit. He never pulled out of the driveway without leaving tire tracks, rubber, and then it went downhill from there. But at any rate, his dad kind of liked me, the academic, and so forth, and tried to be respectful as, a kid. But anyway, so I had met him one evening. By the way, this gentleman was never home except during major holidays. He was a Washington, D.C. person. Had his own apartment there. He and his wife were very liberated. They both had their companion. It was a very, above board everything. It's funny. They even had them at, Thanksgiving, Christmas dinners. It was very polite. Anyway, one night I happened to come by and my friend was not there, and we just sat and talked for a bit, and I really didn't know what this gentleman did, and no one talked about it. And I asked him, something in that regard, and he sat there. It was like he was looking through the wall. I mean, just staring straight ahead. And he told me that he was a member of a 3-man committee that gave the final budget approvals for black budget projects.
Wow.
And he said they came to the budget request was so huge one year that he and the other 2 men were just, they just refused to sign it. I guess they had some 4-star general sitting there in front of them, and they said, "Look, this is just an enormous sum of money, and we're not going to sign off the approval until we know where it's going, what it's for." And he said they took them to this hangar that was full of all sizes of flying saucers, and said, "That's where the money's going." Mm. Now, he said that happened in the early 60s. What that means is we have had a secret space program since at least the early 60s.
Wow. Somehow that doesn't surprise me based on all the information that so many people have worked so hard to get out into the public arena the last, say, 12, 15 years. But it's staggering to think that that's the case, and that they were able to dig it that deeply down and hide it that well for so long.
Well, I mean, they've used a lot of methods: intimidation, assassination, but power is one of the more addictive things in the world, and people who have been let in on the greatest secret of all time, have an incentive to keep it to themselves. I mean, can you imagine the technology that's been locked away from? I'm reminded of a quote by Ben Rich, who was known as the father of stealth. Mm-hmm. He was also the CEO of the Lockheed Skunk Works, where they perform most, if not, a very large part of all of the government's secret projects. Anyway, Ben Rich is quoted as having said before he died, "We have the technology to take E.T. home."
Wow. Wow.
And Einstein was wrong. It wouldn't take light years.
Wow.
So, I mean, when you think about disclosure mm-hmm. and the enormity of what that means, it is mind-boggling. In other words, a lot of the stories that you've heard that you dismiss, secret. Look, if we've had this technology since the 60s, you think that they've just been buzzing around out there in the atmosphere and these things? Mm. I mean, this is capable of interstellar travel.
Right. Or interdimensional. I mean, forget stellar.
I mean, certainly. We don't know for sure exactly how it operates, but that's, I mean, the implications are just absolutely mind-boggling. So, I can understand from the folks who want to hide the truth from us why they would be concerned. I mean, half the world is starving, and the other half is trying to convert each other, or take what the other has, or clawing their way up the corporate ladder or whatever. I mean, people are so into their own thing that the idea that we're not the top of the food chain, and that, frankly, why would you want to pay taxes? I mean, if your government doesn't even control the skies or whatever, has no control over these beings because they're so far advanced than us, and they're, here routinely. I mean, it would just change the calculus of almost everything that you could think of: religion, economics,
right?
Whatever.
Ken, I don't want to. I hate to interrupt you, but you probably aren't going to believe this, but we have like less than 5 minutes left now.
Oh my gosh!
Yes, really. Time flies. So before we close out tonight, I do want to mention the appendices in the book, because I think it's a unique feature that I've not seen in another fictional account that's related to technology. Can you say just a little bit about that?
Well, I wanted the book to be something that would be a resource for people who are maybe new to ufology, and I think that there are some facts and cases and situations in there that even many people who've been involved in ufology for years may or may not be aware of, or at least know, if they've heard it, where to put their fingers on it. And so also I wanted to provide a sort of a factual basis for many of the scenarios in Marc's adventure here, Marc's investigation, and to let you know that, hey, if this situation sounds far-fetched, when you get to the back of the book, you're going to read about some some events that actually took place that are very similar. So it's in a way, it's sort of a book within a book, and I think that even there are nuggets along the way in the book itself, in the novel, that are I bring out some fact-based discussion in there. And I hope everybody enjoys it. I had a fun writing it, living it, thinking about it for a long time. And hopefully people will like it enough that maybe we'll do, continue Marc Slade's investigations.
And I hope that it does work out like that. And actually, I think there's a good chance that it may turn into a movie. Our producer's saying that we've got a call coming in.
Oh.
Let's see. Joe, if you want to, let's try and take it real quick. As long as they understand we don't have more than a minute or so. We do have a question from the chat room real quick, too, Ken. Someone wants to know what your favorite modern UFO encounter story is.
Yeah, we kind of had a connection with Betty Hill, but Betty and Barney Hill, of course, that's a classic. But they did discover a number of things in that case that turned out later. The amniotesis that was performed on her was really not heard of back then. When I say it was performed on her by the aliens that she described, so that was certainly a fascinating case. I don't know. I've seen and been involved in a number of what I think are outstanding cases, and one of them may be the subject of a book. I don't want to give away too much, but it actually will connect the paranormal with UFOs, ETs, and portals, and a number of fascinating things. And that's part of the whole reason and rationale for the existence of EPIC is we do feel that there is a unifying theory for many of these phenomena. And so that, unfortunately, I can't tell you the name of it because right now it's still kind of on the drawing board. But
well, we've got people in the chat room who want you to come back and talk with us some more, and we've only got about 15 seconds left. Real quick, I want to mention that back-to-back, I'm going to be here next week talking to Dr. Rita Louise about the E.T. Chronicles. So be sure and join us again next week. And Ken, your book, they can go to epicvoyagers.com and get an autographed copy directly from you. They can get it at amazon.com and also go to the publisher, glanettie.com. So check on the Epic Voyagers website for the promo. Ken, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us tonight.
I enjoyed it. Yes, I'm glad to come back to it sometime.
And definitely don't let your ink get dry. We want you to do some more writing. You think you can handle that?
Well, I'm already sort of pulling together research now for the next one, and that's the case that I think will tie 2 or 3 of these things together.
Great. Okay, well, everybody have a wonderful and a safe week.
Thank you for being with us tonight. Please join us again next Monday evening for Extraordinary Phenomena Investigations Council's Epic Voyages. I'm Roger Peacock for Epic. Until next time.